Our evening speaker to open the program is someone who really doesn't need an introduction to many of the women in this room. She is a person who's done incredibly groundbreaking research on the subject of women and leadership and centered leadership. Please welcome Joanna Barsh, who is a director at McKinsey & Company.
All right. Thank you for having me back again this year. How many people were here last year? Well, gosh, you could imagine how I felt when I woke up this morning and said, I have to go meet all these incredibly beautiful women who are very powerful. They're the most powerful women. So I put on all the jewelry that I own, which is why you see I have two different color earrings. And I brought my sneakers just in case you didn't like the shoes. And I'm here to talk to you for 4 minutes about our latest research, McKinsey & Company research on unlocking the full potential of women, which, by the way, you are all experts in. So I'm only going to give you the new news. And it may be new to all the men not in the room and not new to you. I apologize for that. So we worked this year with 60 companies. Some of them may be represented by people in the room. And in those 60 companies, we did a few things. One of the things we did is look at the pipeline. And you've read all the news that says there is nothing changing in the pipeline, right? For the Fortune 500 companies, it's just the same. Every single year, it's the same. Well, it's actually not true. Because as you go underneath the surface, we took 4 metrics for success. You know about women at the top being a metric, but we also took women at the beginning of the pipeline. We took the odds of women versus men, because many of you know that the odds of making it as a woman are half as good as the odds for men, but there are companies that actually don't believe that. And the third thing we looked at is the mix of line and staff. So are there companies out there who are able to do all 4 things well? If they could, then they should outperform everybody else on their pipeline. We found 12 companies out of the 60 that actually make it on 3 of those 4 metrics. And their women at the top is 30% versus 19% for the average in the C-suite, which is pretty darn good. Nobody made it on 4 out of 4 metrics. And then when you look at the other companies, almost all of them only had 1 metric. So it's really far to go. But we know that there are companies doing it. The second thing we did is we talked to 200 women across the 60 companies who were chosen by heads of HR as especially great women. And what did we find? We found they're just as great as everybody here in this room. They work really hard. They're persistent in getting feedback. They're resilient. They, in fact, produce results on the bottom line. These women are unbelievable. So when we showed that information to the CEOs, they said, sure, if you over-deliver, you will get to the top. And I asked my mathematician husband about that. And David, who many of you know, is a very Israeli mathematician. Need I say any more? And what David said is, do they tell the men that they have to over-deliver to get to the top, or just the women? So think about that. You know the barriers. This year, I found a couple of new things with the team. Last year, we talked about middle of the pipeline, women in the middle. This year, we got the numbers. It's unbelievable. Out of the 60 companies, there's about 480,000 women working at these companies. That's already pretty exciting news. I know there is a company in the room with a very big retailer who would think 480,000 is like peanuts, but for the rest of us, big news for a Fortune 500 company. And if you look at women in the middle versus women in senior management versus women at the top, in the middle there were on average 2,000 women. And if you go one step up to VP, which is the beginning of senior management, only 100. So you go from 2,000 to 100 women. And then if you go up to SVP and say, let's just worry about our SVPs because everybody else can make it on their own, they're only 16 on average. And then when you go up to the top, you know the numbers. It's only 1 or 2 women in the executive suite. So if we want to make a difference, we have to start in the middle, because that's where there is, on average, 2,000 talented women who've already proven that they can manage. The second thing we learned, you all know about sponsorship. Sylvia was here last year. We all talked about sponsorship a lot for the last 3-4 years. It really, really matters. 90% of the successful women had sponsors If I had time, we could talk about what is a sponsor versus a mentor. But you really need to have 2 or 3 sponsors, and you need to be a sponsor for 2 or 3 women. And I'll get back to what sponsors look like and feel like. But for me, the biggest aha was how important mindsets are for the company and for the women. Unbelievably important. I'll give you 2 examples to remain in this room. One was from, am I talking to some media people or what? One was head of HR of a really big company. I won't tell you what kind of company. And he said to us, I gotta tell you, I've been in this business for a really long time. It's harder for women, and there are more challenges for women, and I see it every day. And you know what I see? I see that when we put a woman in a top position, the first thing that happens is the men try to gun her down, and they wouldn't do that for men. So here's the advice for all the senior women in the room. You get a new position, this comes from a CEO, the first thing you do is reorganize. That sets the power dynamic straight right from the start, because you make everybody around you go, she must be the boss. The second thing I ponder, and I would love some help from this group. Of the 200 women, about 165 of them, we talked to about, what do you aspire to get to? And 41% of them aspire to the executive suite, which seems like a really good number because only 18% of women in beginning jobs aspire to get to the top. But that leaves 59% of women who declared they do not aspire, which is interesting. So when we pushed deeper, what we found is it was not so much about these women. It was about the dysfunctionality of the top team. They just didn't aspire to be part of that group. So that's something that we women can change when we get to the top. So what I want to tell you is the answer to what you can do and take back to your companies and how you can think about what will really make a difference. And the first thing is the CEO has to be obsessed with gender diversity. In fact, several of them said to us, what business case? Forget the business case, it's so obvious. We're in a talent war. We were building a talent advantage. We need women at the top, half the world's population. How stupid can you be, Joanna? So they're right. So what does it mean to be intense, obsessed CEO? The first thing is sponsorship. The CEO has to be a sponsor. The top team have to have an expected norm of sponsoring women. And it's not about cuddly. Sponsors are not cuddly people who sort of bear hug your way up to the top. In fact, all of the women who had sponsors said, that was the meanest man in the whole place. That guy was a total curmudgeon, yelled at people, said nasty things whenever he could. And behind the scenes, he got me promoted over and over again. So sponsors don't have to be nice people or good-looking people, such as we are in the room. The second thing is, what do we mean by world-class talent management? There are a lot of HR professionals in the room who know far better than I do what that means. But this is at a level that you've never seen before, except in maybe your companies, where it's about recruitment and evaluation and promotion and garnering all these women through this pipeline at a level of detail that you wouldn't believe. And the CEO sits in the meeting because he wants to know every single case. There are over 2,000 cases, if we go all the way down in the middle, that the CEO needs to know and the top team needs to know, because it's not something that is an HR job. It's a top management and HR job. Then accountability is the next one. I love this one. They are accountable. 2 of these CEOs made quotas. Remember last year we said, quota? Nobody in America can do a quota. Well, that's just not true. Now, maybe these guys were European to start with, but they set quotas. And a few other guys set targets, and they tied incentives to the targets. Very many people in the room are going to say, but that means that you're not going to get good talent, right? Because everybody's going to make their numbers in order to make their bonus. And what the companies did is they set up a recruitment process that keeps it honest, so that you can indeed go forward with such a bold proposition of target and incentive. And finally, diversity. Is there anybody in diversity in the room? There are a couple of people. This one was a really interesting one, diversity with clout. So imagine yourselves with giant sticks walking into the room, talking to the CEO, talking to the top team. This is not diversity who are nice. This is diversity who call out awareness. So if I wrap it all together in my remaining 3 breaths, this is about cultural transformation, nothing less than that. And the obsessed CEOs get it. They become self-aware. They make choices. One of their choices is to help women get ahead. And they practice over and over again because we all make mistakes. It's not about conscious, unconscious bias, which is definitely a part of it. It's really about cultural transformation. What kind of environment do we want to have? And how do we become conscious of what's limiting us? For us women, there's a lot that limits us, and we learned about that, whether it's politics or family life choices that people are making, or a love of doing the job you're in as opposed to the next job up. Lots of things hold us back. For companies, it's the same thing, and those CEOs get it. So one thing I want to tell you is that in the age of uncertainty and complexity and change and everything else that's going on, beside wearing all your jewelry every day, you can, in fact, make a difference. And you can make a difference by being that kind of leader, which you are, adaptive, centered, able to change, agile, really thinking through multiple lenses of any problem. That's what women bring to the table. That is the strongest business case of all, the case of leadership, where we are sadly lacking, not only in this country, but in many, many countries, for more and better leaders, which we could fill a few boards with everybody here. So thank you for listening. This is the report. And I think we've left it for you at the end of your dinner, so no more numbers.